few weeks ago, Esther was in Del Mar. She has a house and a guest house there. She looked out at her ocean view. She'd been gone for months and she couldn't see the ocean because her trees and bushes had grown in and they had obscured her view. So the gardener came, and that day he was coming, it was his day, and she said, can you trim these bushes so that I can see the ocean? And he said, yes, of course, but there may be something down in the ravine that might be part of the problem. And Esther said, well, if it's on my property, I own half of the ravine, not the other half, then trim it or take it out, but just be aware. And he said yes, gave her thumbs up, and off she went to lunch. And when she came back, she went up on her deck and she could see the ocean. She was so happy. It looked so good. It was back. And then she saw something that really bothered her. She saw two big tree trunks, very large ones, over close to a neighbor's property, all the way to the ground. And she thought, oh, how could that misunderstanding have happened? I thought I was clear about that, but ooh, the ocean looks so good. And then she thought, they're remodeling that house over there. Maybe it's new owners and maybe they don't know those trees were there. And then a day or two later, she saw a man on the patio in a suit looking at the tree stumps. And she thought, ah. And then he took his camera out and took a picture of them. And Esther thought, I'd better go confess. So it took her a while to find the place. She'd never been over there, and it's across the ravine, and she didn't know what road led into it. She finally made her way there, and all the way there she practiced her story to say to him that I did this and I'm so sorry, and I didn't mean for it to happen, and I'll do whatever you want me to do to make it up to you. I'll plant new trees, I'll plant your whole property, I'll do whatever you want. I didn't mean for this to happen. But he wasn't there when she got there. He had already gone. And so she went back home, and the next day she went to lunch again with the same friend. And when they came back, she walked him through the lower house and said, look what I did, and showed him these tree stumps. And he looked across and he said, Esther, your gardeners didn't just cut those trees down. Why isn't the hillside all torn up? Where's all the debris from the trees? They couldn't have possibly have done that while we were at lunch. And Esther looked and she thought, well, of course, that's right. They would have had to have had a helicopter, somebody sawing it off at the bottom and then just carry the whole thing away. And then she stepped out on the edge and she looked up closer to her house, and there was a very small tree stump up there with all the debris from the tree still lying right there where the gardeners had cut it. And all that had happened is they'd cut down a little tree and made it possible for her to see something she wasn't used to seeing. It really shook her up, because she now understood how completely illogical that belief was. And yet she had believed it. The circumstantial evidence had led her to believing something that was ridiculous. And you all have a whole lot of that going on. Circumstantial evidence that makes you believe, because when you stand in results and you know some of what went before, you come to conclusions that aren't even accurate all the time. And it's so easy for you to come to the conclusion that you are not important, or that you are not worthy, or that you didn't do something right, or that something is wrong. Something is wrong about dying? Really? There's something wrong with the subject of dying? You'd think that there was, the way you all carry on. It's like hardly anyone ever resonates with the wholeness of who you are and celebrates the eternal nature of your being. Hardly anybody really understands that you never lose contact, and that the person or being with whom you haven't lost contact now has more insight and more breadth of understanding and more appreciation of life and more access to you than ever before. There's just no downside to what you call the death experience, and yet look how you suffer, and look how you grieve, and look how you mourn the loss of something that is not lost, that can't be lost, that is never lost. This is circumstantial evidence. You made these decisions based upon what you can hear and smell and see and taste and touch. You made the decision about what you're translating with your physical senses, when you are so much more. You have so much more capacity to perceive and to know and to relate and to understand. So when you begin caring about satisfaction and you ask yourself more and more, when a thought comes to you, you're in traffic and someone cuts you off and you think a thought about it, Esther stops and thinks to herself, is this a satisfying thought? And the answer is no. She stops it right then in the early subtle stages. If it's a thought that feels good, encourage it, blow kisses at whoever lets you in, but don't do the other thing to those that cut you off. Be the satisfied being that you have the ability to be, and watch the momentum of your point of attraction increase from satisfaction to passion to that exhilarating feeling of invincibility. Let the clarity of your mind and the joyous nature of your being just sort of overtake you, but it requires some paying attention to the early stages of things, because sometimes a thought can take hold. I can't see the ocean, let's do something about it. Now I can see the ocean, maybe I did too much about it, and I am responsible for this thing that I didn't want to do. And off to the races she was. The circumstantial evidence could not have been more wrong, and yet off to the races that she was. And so Esther began to say to herself, was one of the most beneficial experiences that she ever had, there must be all kinds of things that I believe that are just ridiculous, that I've just picked up and that I've just been bringing them forward and bringing them forward, that are in my way, that are not serving me. And if there is ever a subject that humans keep bringing forward that does not serve you, it's your misunderstanding about the death experience. And so we don't expect you to be celebrating with your mother about it right away, but stay off the subject and on ones that are more satisfying, and know that eventually you will find satisfaction in that subject too. And you sort of kind of gotta if you're going to be happy people, you got to make peace with who you really are. You got to make peace with the wholeness of who you are. You've got to acknowledge that you're here, yes, to manifest here and now, but that you are so much more. And just make the most of what you're here about. But don't use your shortage consciousness, your misunderstanding of the wholeness of who you are, to feel unhappiness about the brevity of your focus through this particular vessel. Because when you reemerge into non-physical, you'll still be focused into this time and space.
I had a dream like 6 years ago, and I saw this like tall blue lady, and she like zoomed up on me, and it was weird. She like either touched my forehead or something, and I just got this like I knew everything, and it was like, you know, like a remembering of everything, and it's pretty cool. I try to think about that a lot. So the question would be, is there a personal connection, or have I just seen a lot of movies like The Fifth Element?
My remembering Avatar.
Also true, yeah.
The best thing about dream state is that while you are asleep, your resistance is low. A dream is a creation, just like real life is a creation. So when you dream something, you have created it. When you have a really meaningful dream like that, know that you are interpreting something into something that makes sense to you. Humans who have sensed for a long time, or known as they tap into non-physical energy and get different visions and impressions of the larger nature of your being, for a long time you have tried to make literal physical sense of something that is non-physical. So when we talk about non-physical, we talk about energy, we talk about consciousness, we talk about knowing, because the physical nature of your world is here with you. In other words, it's your physical senses that are interpreting this energy into the tangible that you call real life experience. So it's natural that you would want to do that with non-physical too, that you would want to make non-physical more tangible too, because everything that is non-physical is coming out into the physical form with all of you. So in the earlier days, earlier than now anyway, we don't have to go back to the beginning, wherever that is. In the earlier days, when you tried to interpret non-physical through your physical senses, you made them into angels and you gave them wings, because the only truth or circumstantial evidence that you were accepting as a mass consciousness on the planet, if anybody was flying, it had feathers. So your logic gave this non-physical energy that you sensed and knew and felt was real. You gave them wings. Today you make them into spaceships, you make them into ETs. You turn this consciousness into however far your logic can bring you. What we're asking you to do, we're asking you to take just a slightly different approach to this. We're asking you to find the vibrational state of being that your non-physical being is. In other words, we're asking you to look into this vortex and find the emotional components. We're asking you to feel for your alignment. That's what satisfaction does, rather than need to see it and hear it and smell it and taste it and touch it. So as you reach for the feeling of alignment through satisfaction and you accomplish that, then what happens is that what we want you to acknowledge, the perspective that we know would be of benefit for you to discover, is that now you stand in your physical being, you accomplish that satisfaction more and more and more. We'll talk in the next segment about some simple ways to do that. And then as that non-physical perspective flows through you, you understand that all that has ever been keeps coming forward again and again and again. It's not some other place, it's not some other galaxy, it's not some other heaven, it's not some other state of being, it's not some other time-space reality. It's that consciousness is coming forward with all of you here and now. Can you feel the difference? And so certainly nothing wrong with interpreting your connection with source in that way. It was the most logical way for you to do it at that time. But these days we want you to interpret it in this way. Oh, that is so satisfying. We want you to find steady meditation where you know for sure that you're in the receiving mode. And then we want you to consciously acknowledge when a thought drops into your mind that you are in the receiving mode and that thought came from that broader perspective. And then we want you to be so connected to that thought that you feel inspired to move forward with the feeling or the impulse of it. And then we want you to witness the outcome of having received that thought from what you know is the receiving mode, and then move forward with that thought, and then watch the powerful and wonderful positive results of that thought as you are tangibly creating with your hands in your own vibrational clay in this time-space reality. Can you feel how big and wonderful that is? There are so many ways of looking at all of this, but unless you are incorporating the whole of who you are into your now, then you're missing so much of it. So in the beginning, we want to talk to you as if you are two beings. There's the you, the physical you, and there's the inner being. And you say, all right, well, I can sort of accept that because I've thought about my soul for a while. And then we talk about how the part you play and the part your soul plays. And then we talk about you deliberately reaching for feelings of satisfaction so that you can blend with the whole of who you are, so that your point of attraction is all that your inner being is attracting, which is where all of your power is. So when you sync up with who you are, when you sync up with the true essence of who you are, you sync up with all you knew before you came and all that you've added to it since you got there. You sync up with what man wants to call God. In those moments of satisfaction, you become a vibrational vortex or vessel or pipeline through which the energy that creates worlds flows. And then you are the creative genius that you were born to be, you see. And you get to play it out in the satisfying ways that your life is carved out for you. You get to make the differences that you want to make, whether it's music or whatever. It doesn't matter what your subject through which you flow it is. It's the satisfaction that you feel that matters most, you see. Your inner beings are delighted in this conversation because they know that today, with some new questions, we know we have another hour or a little less, that today with some of these questions and answers, that you are in a place right now where you have a clearer picture of how it all fits together than you have ever had, and some sort of personal practical steps that you can take that will hook you into this energy, which means the things that you've been asking for are going to show up in exaggerated fashion. When we come back after a segment of refreshment, we want to talk about the things that you want to talk about, but the things that we want to talk about are surefire ways to get into the receiving mode and easy ways to acknowledge when you're there and when you're not, because you're always under the influence of something. Esther has some dash cards that are at the printer that say under the influence. She didn't think it would make a good bumper sticker for you, because you're always under the influence of something. What is it? If it's satisfying, you're under the influence of who you really are. If it's not satisfying, you're under the influence of something else.